Alright guys, so today we're gonna do something a little different. It's been a while since I filmed one of these like marriage and sex videos. I filmed a couple of them before, so if you guys are new to the channel or like you haven't seen those, I'll link them down below in case you guys just, I don't know, need more content like this that you want to watch. I'll leave those in the description box. But I have a lot of things that I want to talk about. So to give you a little background of why this conversation is even happening, I told you guys on Instagram that over like the last couple weeks I started watching that show called Sex Life on Netflix, and I started watching it because it was like very trendy and like a bunch of people were talking about it. So at first I was like curious because like I wanted to see like what the hype is about. Like whenever there's something that's being hyped up like that catches my attention like that, I kind of want to see what it's about. So I started watching it, and while I was watching it I had a whole lot of thoughts about it. And then at the end of the show I was really pissed off. Like honestly, I was very mad, I was very upset. And so I kind of shared that on Instagram, and you guys were like, please make a video, let's talk about it, let's chat about it. So that's what we're gonna do today. So first of all, let's just put the disclaimer out there. Like I'm sure most of you guys are, you know, obvious to the fact of like, please do not watch this video if you have kids around, because this is a like wife mama chat between you and me, like girl to girl, wife to wife. We're gonna talk about some stuff. I don't know how like detailed we're gonna get, but we're talking about stuff that you don't want your little ones to be around listening to. Also, if you're like my grandma or my grandpa, maybe this is not the video to watch. I'm sure my brother will be skipping this video, and that is a good thing. So I'm putting that out there right now. I'm also gonna tell you up front that I'm probably gonna share a lot of unpopular opinions, and some of them may offend some people. I'm very sorry. Like these are just my opinions. So this is like my channel. I can share my thoughts, my opinions. Does not mean that I am right. It does not mean that I am wrong, but they are my feelings towards the topic of sex and sex in marriage and things that I'm very upset that the show like showed and all of that. So I don't think you're necessarily gonna need to watch the show. Like I'm gonna try to talk about things in a way that like if you've never watched the show before, you can still kind of relate to. So we'll kind of start off there, and then as we go, like I'll start mentioning some stuff from the show. So this might be a little rambly. Get some wine, get some coffee, whatever. Let's chill, let's talk about this. So when I first started watching the show, I honestly thought that I was gonna really like it, because if you've never seen it before, the show kind of centers around this mom, right? She's this woman, she's a mom of two, she has two little kids. So she has like a newborn, and then she also has a kid, I don't know how old he is, maybe he's like 3 or 4, right? So she's a mom, and like a lot of the struggle that she's dealing with is something that's very relatable, right? Like the idea that you're a mom, so like now you feel like your entire life is this new thing. Like you maybe had a crazy past, and she did. Like she had a very wild and crazy, you know, sex life before she became a married woman and before she had kids. And now she's kind of finding herself in like this, I don't know, like this life where she's like having a midlife crisis almost. Like, I'm a mom, am I still sexy? Does my husband still find me attractive? Like I feel like all of that is very relatable, right? Like I have struggled through that too before. Like I've gone through times, even still now sometimes, there are days when I'm like, you know, I miss the days of like putting on like a really tight little mini dress and like going out somewhere and getting that attention, and like knowing that, you know, Joe is like wanting to like be all over me. Like sometimes I miss that. And there are days like today when I was covered in like blood from Jackson's nosebleed and like just yogurt because he was throwing himself on me, and like I haven't showered in like a day or two, and like, you know, I just don't feel like my old self, right? And you wonder sometimes like, does my husband still find me attractive? Does my husband still want to have sex with me? I've talked about before like how you know, just at least in my experience, your sex life changes. Like I'm a mom now, I'm tired. Like I think that's okay. Like let's normalize the fact that you're tired and you don't want to have sex every single night. But point is, like I thought that that was a relatable topic. And there are scenes like, you know, where her and her husband are in the bathroom, and like, you know, maybe she's like a little bit like hot for her husband, which by the way, he's a very good looking guy, and like everybody on the show is very good looking. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm sure draws a lot of people to the show. But you know, like he'll pass her by in the bathroom, and instead of like asking her to join him in the shower. He's just kind of like, oh, all right, let me do my thing. And I can relate in the sense that Billy is the main character in this show. She's kind of like, you know, feels like, you know, I want my husband to desire me. I want my husband to want me to join him in the shower. Like, I get that. And I think that that's a good conversation to have. Let's have the conversation about how you can become a mom and how there's like that weird time where you still want to be this desired woman, and how do you talk to your husband about how you're feeling that way. And I think that that conversation is something that we need to get better at having, like talking to your spouse about what your needs are, and talking to your spouse about just sex in general, what you want more of, what you don't want more of, the fact that you don't feel desired, how they can make you feel desired. I think that's a good thing to talk about. But I think, like, unfortunately, like, the reality is, like, those conversations are awkward to have, right? Like, how do you tell your husband, like, hey, I don't feel like you're making me feel sexy, or like, you know, all of that stuff is sometimes hard to talk about. But I do think it's a good combo that we need to be having more of, because what ends up happening, and again, this entire video, by the way, is a spoiler alert. Like, if you plan on watching the show, like, and you don't want to know what the ending is like or what happens, then maybe don't watch this just yet, because I'm talking about what happens on the show. So what ends up happening, you know, she's going through all of this, which I get, and I feel for her, because to a certain extent, you know, I've experienced some of that. But then the problem is, you know, she's not communicating with her husband, and then she starts like fantasizing about like the past, fantasizing about her hot ex-boyfriend that she had all this crazy sex with. And again, the guy's a good looking guy, like, we'll give him that. But she starts thinking about it, and then she starts writing about it in her little freaking computer diary, which again, like, you know, why are you writing about that in your diary on your computer? I don't understand that. And long story short, like, her husband ends up finding her computer diary, reads through it, and imagine, like, her husband feels like crap now because he's reading like the intimate details of her fantasy, like her past sex life with her ex-boyfriend. Like, that can't feel very good. Imagine if you were reading something that your husband wrote about his ex-girlfriend and all the sex she had with him. I don't think that's something that anybody would ever want to read about. Like, I think we're all like grown-ups, and like, we're not naive to the fact that for a lot of us, like, our partners have been with other people, like, we've been with other people, like, people have a past. Now, do you want to like read in detail like what happened? Probably not so much. So anyway, then, like, you know, I'm gonna do a terrible job of like summarizing the show, but then at some point, you know, Billy, she ends up like bumping into the ex-boyfriend, and then all these thoughts come back, and she's wondering like if she made the right choice, or should she have been with the guy that was like exciting and like that she had this crazy sex with, or like she's got her husband who is a good guy, is a good husband, but like that chemistry, that rush, that excitement, it's not there. So she's like questioning this, and I'm watching this and I'm really frustrated with her. Like, let's just stop there. I'm frustrated with her because she has a wonderful life, like, from the outside, right? Like, again, this is a show, it's a fictional show, but she's got this great life. She has a wonderful husband who loves her, who supports her. He's got a great job, like, they live in this beautiful house. She has 2 beautiful children. Like, it seems like she's got a lot going for her. Like, I feel like that's such a great life, and it's the life that she chose for herself. You know, she was dating Cooper, which was her husband, and eventually, like, they got married, and she has, at the beginning of the show, you're like, she's got this great life, like, anybody would kill for this. And then towards the middle of the show, when she starts thinking about her ex-boyfriend, like, she's number one, like, playing with fire, right? Because that's not a good thing that you want to be playing with. And she's almost like not satisfied with it. Like, she still wants more. Like, she wants to like also have this steamy, passionate like relationship, or she's still thinking about the sex that she used to have with her boyfriend. And me personally, like, it frustrated me because I feel, again, my opinions, I feel like she's got a great life. Why are you unhappy? Why are you unsatisfied with that? So I guess, like, bigger picture, the problem that I had, like, I was frustrated with the show, particularly like the fact that the premise is almost like she's got this great life, but it's not what she wants. And I feel like in the media, especially lately, or, you know, recently, like, that's almost like what you see. You see the typical mom, she becomes a mom and like she doesn't want this, she wants more. And you know, for us moms who stay at home, then when you watch stuff like that, you start asking yourself like, wait a minute, like, am I not supposed to want this wonderful life? Like, am I not supposed to want to be home with my kids? If I just want to be home with my kids and have a husband and be a stay-at-home mom, like, does that mean like what, that I'm missing out on something? Does it mean that I'm lazy? I just feel like that has become almost like the exception, right? Like if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're just raising your kids, like that's almost weird somehow. Like you're supposed to desire to automatically want to go back to work. And not that there's anything wrong with that, right? Like let's get that straight. If you want to go back to the workforce, you do you. I personally though feel like I've said like multiple times on this channel before, like the fact that you want to raise your kids, if you have the ability to be at home and raise your kids, I feel like that is so much purpose in and of itself. Like that is a job, like that's a real job. Like you are the freaking VP, CEO, like head honcho of that job. You might not have like a corner office, you might not get to wear a fancy suit every day, like you wear spit up on your shirt, like it's just different. But that's a real job with a real purpose. And so when you see shows like that where, you know, the woman is automatically like, oh, I've lost myself, or like I don't know, I feel like I need to go back to my past life. I feel like, I don't know, like there's something that doesn't sit well with me. Like we all think about it from time to time, but like for the entire show to revolve around that and thinking about your ex-boyfriend, like I didn't like that. So I'm getting like off on a tangent. I want to continue with the story, but that's something that did make me mad just in general. So throughout the story, you know, she ends up like texting her ex-boyfriend. She ends up you know, wanting to see him, and she ends up seeing him at some point. They don't like actually have sex, but like you can tell like that curiosity is there, or the desire is there so much that she would lie to her husband at times about where she's at and all of that, which again, not cool, not something that we want to make almost like, I don't know, something to look up to. Like, go Billy, you're going after your dreams. Like, no, you're getting really close to cheating on your husband, and that's not cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like, you know, she's a very likable character. Again, a very attractive lady. She's relatable in some senses, but then it's almost like there's some people that I'm sure are watching this and cheering her on. Like, hey, you know, you get to choose between your ex-boyfriend and your husband. And it's like, you kind of already chose, you know, you kind of already chose to be with your husband. You have 2 kids, like that's the life that you chose for yourself. And I guess one of the questions that comes up in the show is like, at one point she meets with her friend who's a psychologist. Something that I found like very interesting, the conversation, is this idea that, you know, like 85% of her life she was really happy with, right? And then there's this other 15%, which was like the sex and like that chemistry, that excitement that she didn't get with her husband. So then the question became like, well, is it even possible for the person that gives you that stability, that protection, like your husband that gives you that life that's solid, that's stable, can he also be the same guy that gives you the other 15%, that's the sex and the chemistry and the chase and, you know, like all of that risk and excitement that comes with like a new relationship, that comes with your carefree days before you're a mom of 2, before you're making doctor's appointments and like talking about like car insurance and like, you know, all the stuff that comes with like real life. Is it possible that your husband can give you that whole 100%? So I thought that that was an interesting like question, and I think that the reality, like my opinion, would be that probably not. Like you probably, like your husband, like as much as I love my husband, right, I love him and we're very happy with our sex life. Like I don't feel like I'm missing like, oh my god, I'm gonna go and try to find some new guy to like give me that excitement. But is it gonna be the same as like those young, wild, carefree days? Probably not, right? But the point is that when you're in a marriage, like you have so much more. Like the 85% outweighs those 15% like by far. And yes, you can always work within your marriage to spice things up and to, you know, make things better and more exciting and do, like, I don't know, fun, hot stuff, like whatever. It's in your marriage. You can do whatever you want in your marriage. But would you sacrifice that 85% so you could have the other 15%? I mean, I think that's a dumb trade-off. I think in some ways the show kind of wants to make you think like, oh, you can actually have 100%. Like, you can actually have that 15% hot sex life and also like have that same person be your husband. Maybe that's what I kind of gathered from it. Like, that's what they wanted to portray. I just don't think it's realistic. And that's the problem that I have with the show. I don't think it's realistic to paint this picture. And again, maybe your specific situation is different, right? And maybe the guy that you married, and that's an incredible father and an incredible, I don't know, provider and all of that, also like you have the best sex of your entire life and you feel like you're like, I don't know, 21 years old again, and like you are just living the dream and there's nothing wrong with your relationship and you never get bored and you never feel like you're not desired. Great, congratulations, that's wonderful. But I feel like for the most part, kind of the show is a bit unrealistic, and it's dangerous in my opinion because it's making women feel like you have to find that 100%, or again, that 15% is worth sacrificing something that's good and stable and something that's real. Because I think, like, you know, most of us at some point or another, like, you know, there's that element of excitement that comes with like a new relationship, or with, I don't know, just with someone who's a little bit more of a daredevil or the bad boy or whatever. Like, some of us have experienced that. But I feel like it's unrealistic to expect that newness and that chemistry and that level of excitement when it comes to your sex life is going to carry into your marriage for the end of time. Like, at some point, most of us, I would imagine, like, you're in a marriage and you love your partner, you love your husband, you love your wife, but like, I don't know, you don't have the energy to do the stuff that you used to do. You know, you get into the routine of being married and having jobs and having a house to manage, and like I said, doctor's appointments and all the other boring adulting things that nobody tells you you're gonna have to worry about, now you have to worry about. So life is just different, but that doesn't mean that it's worse. Like, it doesn't mean that it's boring now and that, you know, your marriage is just doomed to always be like this terrible thing. I think that there's something so beautiful about that stability and about being in a marriage between two people, and that, I don't know, like that safety in a marriage. Like, never in a million years would you want to jeopardize that for a thrill. Never would you want to jeopardize that for, you know, a night out at the bar with a new guy. Like, I don't want you guys to think that like I'm a prude. Like, I'm not a prude. Like, I very much like sex. Like, I very much enjoy that. I enjoy feeling, like I said, hot and desired and all of that. But I think that you can do that in a marriage, and it takes work. It takes a lot of communication, and that's where I feel like I wish the show would have gone in that direction. I think the show should have gone in the direction of, you know what, Billy, she's dealing with this midlife crisis. She doesn't feel desired. She wants to have that level of, let's spice it up a little bit in her marriage with Cooper. So let's like focus the show on them working it out together, and the awkwardness and the trying new things and the having those conversations. I think that would have been a great show to show that that's what happens in a marriage. I don't think they needed to take it to the level where now Billy is flirting with the idea of her ex-boyfriend and showing up to her ex-boyfriend's house, and like, I just don't think that that was necessary. So again, those are just a lot of the things that I was bothered by. I was also bothered by the fact that, you know, while Cooper and Billy are working on their marriage, then at one point they're trying to spice it up, or whatever they think is gonna, I don't know, they're trying to spice it up. So then their friends end up taking them to a sex party, and that's like the big scandalous episode in the series. I think it's like the second to last episode, where they go to a house, and they didn't know it was going to be a sex party, but it ended up being a sex party where it's like this big house and a bunch of couples, and everybody's like naked in the house and having sex with each other and swapping and all this stuff, and people are watching, and it was crazy. The entire show, by the way, is basically like watching porn. Like, the only thing I don't think did I see a vagina? I don't know if I saw a vagina, but you definitely see everything else. Sorry, my battery died, so I had to go change it out. But anyway, going back to Sex Party, yeah, I think that you see like a whole lot of stuff and it just wasn't necessary. Like, it wasn't necessary to introduce that concept, like to show a sex party, to normalize a sex party. Like, what the heck is that? Like, I guess some people do that, right? But I don't think that's what you would want to show, like, hey, this is an option if you want to spice up your marriage. Like, go to a house and let your husband get a blowjob from some other girl. Like, that's not a good idea. Like, maybe if you want to call me a prude for that, then fine, then I'm a prude. But I don't think it's ever a good idea to introduce anybody else into your marriage. Like, you guys all know by this point, like, I'm a Christian woman. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. First of all, like, I would literally like just cut somebody if they tried to have sex with my husband. Especially like if I was there, if I was in front of them, like, somebody would lose a finger, like at the very least a finger. Like, I would cut somebody. But it's just not a good idea. Like, I believe that marriage is between, you know, you and your husband, and you need to figure out what is going to help your marriage within your marriage. Just you and your husband, and that is it. Like, nobody else, no third party, no like a bunch of people watching you. Like, I don't agree with that. I feel like that's a recipe for disaster. That's not really gonna solve your problems within your marriage. Whatever you want to do, like, get freaky, do whatever it is that you want to do. Talk about all of your fantasies, talk about role play, and talk about like all of the things that you want to do within your marriage to spice things up, to get to that point where you feel more desired. Like, within your marriage, I don't think that there should be anything that's off the table. I feel like, you know, go to town, you and your husband, like, do whatever it is that you want to do. And I think that was kind of like a concept that was somewhat brought up in the show that I did like the idea that, I think at one point Cooper kind of mentions how, you know, this is my wife, this is like the mother of my kids, like, kind of when he was talking at some point like about sex. And I don't know if it was like implicitly like stated, like, there's an idea by some guys that when you get married, especially when your wife has kids, that somehow now, like, she can't also be sexy because she's the mom of your kids, and you can't have sex with her like you would, I don't know, with some random girl like from a strip club. Like, maybe I'm not explaining that very well, but like, there's this idea that your wife is like pure and holy, and you can't also have her be the one that you want to like bang at night, you know, for lack of better terminology here. And I think that that's something that probably needs to be worked on a little bit more and talked about. The fact that, yes, you have a wife, and yes, she's a mom, and yes, a lot of times she's the homemaker and she's making dinner and all of that stuff. But I mean, wouldn't you want your wife also to be the one that you are sexually attracted to and that you want to come home to and you want to be flirty and sexy with? Like, I feel like that should be what we're working towards, right? Like, we should strive for that, and vice versa, like with your husband too, as opposed to getting to a point where, oh, you feel like you can't touch your wife or you can't touch your husband, but then you start being attracted to somebody at work, or you start being attracted to somebody else new, or somebody that you meet at a bar, or whatever the case is, and then you end up cheating on them, and you end up cheating and breaking apart your marriage. Like, I can see why that happens. Like, I can see how, you know, somebody new makes you feel a certain way, and you feel like, okay, you haven't been desired, or you want to feel that feeling of being desired. Like, I can see, in theory, why that happens so often, and why it's so rare these days to have marriages where people are faithful to each other and stay within their marriage. Like, we're all human, we all have desires and urges, but I think that's why it's important to have those awkward conversations within your marriage, to communicate about what you want, and to really, at the end of the day, like I said, like, that's your husband, that's your wife, like, both of you should also want to like be sexually intimate with each other, and kind of work on that versus finding that from somewhere else. I hope some of that, maybe even like a little bit of that, makes sense. So I don't I don't know, I'm literally just word vomiting here, you guys. Just all of the thoughts that I had about the show. And then of course, like at the end of the show, I freaking hated it. Like I hated the ending of the show, because at the end of the show, you think, right? You think finally that Billy and Cooper, despite all the crazy things that have happened throughout the show, like despite the fact that Cooper knows that Billy went to see her ex-boyfriend, like despite all the things, there's forgiveness that happens. You know, Billy tells him, you know, oh, the stains, because he's all like, oh, there's stains on our marriage now because we've hurt each other. And she's like, the stains come out, don't worry, like we're gonna work on our marriage and work on our family. And so like if the show would have at least ended like that, I would have been like, okay, well at least there was like a reason for all of this, right? There was like that come to Jesus moment, and it took this craziness for her to like really realize like what she was about to give up on, or what she was about to jeopardize in some way. But no, then the show freaking ends with her like literally being like, no, this is not good enough. This is not good enough for me. I can't live without that other 15%. And so she runs to her ex-boyfriend's house. And what's even more upsetting is the fact that she shows up at her boyfriend's house and she says, listen, this doesn't change anything. I'm not gonna leave my husband. Now F me. Now screw me. And so like that's literally how the show ends. And I'm like, what? What on earth are you doing? And her husband also knows, by the way. Her husband is like tracking her on the phone and knows that she's going to see her ex-boyfriend. How? Why would you do that? How is this somehow okay? Like what are we trying to get at here? Like are we trying to get at the fact that she's gonna now like have a husband, but then she's also gonna have like somebody that she can screw on the side? And like, is Cooper gonna be mad about it, or and then like break up with her and like divorce her? Or is like, are they gonna have like a triangle thing going on? Like either way, it's not a good situation. Either way, it makes me pissed off. It makes me pissed off because again, I feel like we're normalizing that. We're normalizing like, hey, like do whatever you want. Like relationships are all different. If you want to have a relationship with 3, 4, 5 people, that's fine. Like, and it's not. Like, it's not. And maybe that's an unpopular opinion. Call me old-fashioned, but I think marriages should be between 2 freaking people. I'm sorry, it is what it is. I do not apologize for that. And so I literally binge watched like the last 4 or 5 episodes one night, like this past week. And I went to sleep at 3 in the morning and I was crying. I was like sobbing while Joseph was asleep behind me, like not behind me, he was beside me, and he was like dead asleep, and I was crying because throughout the show, like you feel for different characters. Like you feel for Billy, like yes, okay, she's going through something, relatable. You feel for Cooper because he reads through his wife's journal, you know, and he's now being tortured by this idea that he's not good enough, by the idea that, hey, this ex-boyfriend is obviously on her mind. Like that can't feel good as a husband. He feels like he can't satisfy his wife. He feels like he's somehow inferior to this other guy. That has to suck. So you feel for him. Then at one point you feel kind of bad for the ex-boyfriend, because the ex-boyfriend also, even though he's an idiot for like trying to insert himself into that marriage and like trying to cause problems, because I mean, he does love her, or supposedly, you know, he loves her. He feels like, oh, you know, he messed up this relationship 8 years ago. He really loves her. He wants to be with her. It was the biggest regret of his life, whatever. Too bad, so sad. Like, she didn't pick you. She didn't marry you. And sometimes you just gotta live with that. But, you know, you feel bad for him because you're like, you know, yeah, he realized a little too late that that was the love of his life. So you feel bad for him in that sense, but you kind of get over it quickly because you're like, whatever, he's gonna be like a freaking homewrecker. So you feel bad for all these people, and then like at the end you're like, I can't feel bad for you anymore, lady. Like you're stupid, you're dumb, you're stupid. And I don't know, maybe you watch the show, maybe you don't feel that way. Maybe you're like, you know what, she was going after the guy she wanted, and look, you know, she either like, there's somebody that messaged me that was like, you did not get the idea of the show. The end of the show was supposed to symbolize that you know, she didn't pick between either guy, she picked herself, or she picked doing what she wanted to do. And like, I don't think that's okay either. Like, you don't just get to make decisions like that about your marriage in a bubble. Like, you can't be that selfish either. Like, there's other people involved, you know? Like, I don't know, it left a bad taste in my mouth. Did not like the show. Like I talked to you guys about on Instagram, I feel like there's not enough shows where the idea of like a happy, imperfect marriage is like the norm, because no marriage, regardless of how strong it is, like no marriage is perfect, and no marriage is gonna be like 100% happy all the time. Like if you never fight with your partner, I don't know, you found like a unicorn, because Joe and I, we fight a lot over the dumbest things. A lot of them which you guys know about. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, look at me, like my relationship is perfect. It's not. It's real, and we've had conversations, and we've had hard conversations and things that are awkward, uncomfortable. Like that's what marriage is. But we are committed to making it work for us together in that marriage. So I feel like there's not enough TV shows and there's not enough like movies out there in the media where that's like the norm, right? Like where that's like the ideal of having just a good, happy, healthy marriage. Like every show these days, or every drama or whatever, like is all about going back to your ex-boyfriend, or not being happy, and you know, cheating and going behind people's backs. And like even the freaking Notebook, like even the Notebook that everybody raves about, you know, like Ali was with some guy, wasn't she? Like she was engaged, I think, to be married, and then she thinks about the other guy, you know, and then they hook up. Like even stuff like that, now that I'm an adult and now that I'm in a solid marriage, like in my 30s, I look back on stuff like that and I'm like, I feel like we were sending the wrong idea. Like I feel like the media sends the wrong idea, and it makes me mad because like I lived through it, but also like I think about what Riley's gonna watch, and she's gonna see stuff like this, and she's gonna see stuff where it's all about the exciting thing and the super romantic thing, the relationship that blows her away, and the guy that takes her to Paris, and you know, like that's what like the media kind of makes you seem, it makes it seem like that's what you're striving for. And in my experience, that's not the solid marriage material guy. Like you want someone that's gonna be the guy that provides you with that stability, that loves you unconditionally, that loves you, that wants to, you know, be there beside you, be a partner, somebody who's like a man of God, somebody that's gonna lead your household. Like that's what I want in terms of like relationships. That's what I want for Riley to ultimately lean towards, versus the exciting, risky guy. Does that make sense? Like maybe that doesn't make sense, but in my mind it makes sense. Like I think about when I used to watch Sex and the City, and I watched Sex and the City before I was married, I think. And when I watched that, like I remember, you know, I was just less experienced in life, you know, and when it came time, like when Carrie was having to pick between, you know, Mr. Big and Aiden, like that was like the big choice, right? Like, are you team Big? Are you team Aiden? At the time I was like all team Big, because he was the handsome older guy and he had the money and he was the one that, you know, could sweep her off her feet and take her to Paris. Like it was her big love, you know, Mr. Big, all of that. And then Aiden was more of like the guy next door, the guy that loved her, but he wasn't as out there and as extreme. Like he was just a solid, good guy. And of course she picked Mr. Big because that was like the thing, right? And now being older, like I feel like Aiden was like the better choice in the grand scheme of things. Like if Aiden and Mr. Big were like two real people, that's probably who I would pick, right? Like Aiden I feel like would have been a better partner. So now we're talking about Sex and the City instead of this show. But those are some of the thoughts that I've been having lately. Like I want more shows where we're showing what a good, solid, healthy relationship looks like. Some of you guys, by the way, like I got a lot of DMs about this. Some of you guys recommended some shows. Like one of them that comes to mind is like Parenthood, which I did watch, and that is one that I would recommend. Like I loved that show, Parenthood. I feel like it shows a lot of like relationships between the mom and the dad, and like there's different couples, and that was a good show. It was like a wholesome show, but also talked through and showed like some of the difficulties that come up in marriage and different situations that come up. So that one I would recommend. A lot of people also said This Is Us, that I had watched for a while and then I just had to stop because it was so sad. Like I would cry through every single episode. But if you want two shows that are not like Sex Life on Netflix, those two would be good to get started with if you guys haven't watched those. But I don't know, man, like maybe I'm just old school, maybe my age is showing, maybe I'm just not that cool and hot and hip anymore and I've turned into a grandma. But the idea that like there are little 18-year-old girls out there watching shows like Sex Life and being like, oh my god, like this is great, and oh my god, great, she went back to Brad, and look, she even has a husband, but she went back to Brad because that guy's hot. And it just blows my mind that that's where we're trying to lead girls. Like that's why they're gonna end up with so many issues down the road, and that is why they're gonna end up in relationships that are not good for them, and relationships where guys treat them like crap, or whatever the case is. Not healthy, stable relationships, because all they see on the media is like what you shouldn't be looking for, essentially. But is it exciting? Yeah, it's exciting. The guys are hot, you know, there's this rush, there's this thrill, and for a time that might be exciting and, you know, it serves its purpose, but that's not like a long-term thing. So I think I'll probably end this here. But I guess like if you take anything out of this conversation, it would be if you're in a marriage and you're unhappy, or you're having issues, or you feel like you're, I don't know, things are not 100% how they used to be, or you feel like there's issues in the sex department, like number one, you're not alone. Number two, I'm sure it's way more common than you think, but the only way to really fix it is to talk about it and to have those hard conversations. Maybe it's the kind of thing where you would benefit from like seeing somebody else, like you can see a family counselor, a sex therapist, whatever it is that you want to call it. I don't think there's any shame in that, because at the end of the day, what you want is to like, you know, like be feeling it with your husband, be feeling it with your wife. If you're, you know, a guy and watching this with your wife, like you married each other, make it work together, like make it work, like be hot for each other, and not be looking for it like elsewhere. I think that would be the goal. Your wife, your husband, yes, they might be the father of your kid or the mom of your kids, but like you can also be like a desirable person, and you can still like get freaky at night, you know, like take care of the kids during the day and get freaky at night. There's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like maybe if more people did that and were okay with that, then there would be less like of the adultery. There'd be less of like having those, oh, it only happened one time, you know, I went to, I don't know, the corporate party, and like all of that kind of stuff maybe would be less. I don't know. Well, I'm gonna end that there. I honestly don't even know what the heck I just filmed, but I did pray. Like sometimes when I have these sit down videos with you guys, I pray, as corny as that sounds, I pray to God that something that I say, that I share, that he gives me the right words to convey his message to you guys. Again, as corny as that sounds. So I hope that you heard something there that maybe resonates with you. Again, I'm not looking, like when I say stuff, like you don't have to agree with me 100%. Like if you agree with me 100%, that's very rare. Like we can have differences of opinion here, but that's something maybe caused you to think, or something resonated with you. At the end of the day, sex was designed by God to be a great thing in a marriage between you and your husband, you and your wife. Like it's not something that should be like a secret. It's not something that you should be ashamed of. Like you can do it. Like you can do it now, and it's a safe thing. It's a loving thing, and it should be a good, fun thing like in your marriage. So I hope that you took something out of this. So that is it. I'm gonna get to bed here soon, and I hope you guys liked this chatty video with me. If there's anything else you want to talk about, or any questions you want me to answer, or any other topics you want me to talk about, whether they're about sex or about marriage or about relationships, let me know. And maybe we can make more of like a wife talk kind of chatty series, and we can do that kind of stuff, like if we're girlfriends just like having Starbucks together and I don't know, just talking about life and things. So that is it. I love your freaking faces. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, watching, all the things. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.